right, guys, welcome back to Fight Promoter University. As promised, I'm going to talk about club shows, specifically promoters, and what they can do right now while we wait for the vaccine rollout and some of the states and counties to lax the restrictions on live events and etc. So, you heard Dana White talk about this already, how he worries for the pipeline of young fighters right now because essentially the main people doing shows are bigger business promoters, the UFC, large boxing. And the reason they're able to do that is due to the revenue options that they have. Mostly they have TV money to support them, so they can rely on not being able to sell tickets to make their money. And that was never the bulk of their revenue anyway. It was never ticket sales. It's always pay-per-view revenue, TV licensing deals, sponsorships, etc. They already had a profit before they sold a single ticket. So for them, their margins are smaller, but they're still able to continue. And when I say their margins are smaller, that is the reason the UFC let so many of their big stars go. Yoel Romero, etc. It's not because Dana White doesn't love those fighters or whatever. He's just trying to keep his overhead down while we come out of this. So, because remember, when you're a promoter and you sign a fighter, you guarantee them X number of fight offers a year. Fight offer is the key, because a fighter could easily just keep rejecting and rejecting and rejecting fight offers, and the promoter can still fulfill that requirement by making an official offer. So, what can a local promoter or someone just starting out do to get around some of this? So really, you gotta break this down like you're a business operator. So what are your revenue options as a small local show? Ticket sales, obviously. Local sponsorships. You could do online streaming services, online pay-per-view. There's been a million, but Go Fight Live for the longest time was always the online pay-per-view. You could sell your pay-per-view for $10. Not the $50-$60 you see for big shows. So with that said, how do we get around it? If your county is only, or your state, city, whatever, is only allowing 10% occupancy, which is what I'm seeing in a lot of cases, 10% occupancy. How do you get around that? Let's say you need 1,000 people to make your 50 grand in revenue in a night from ticket sales that you're expecting. Well, if you can only sell 100, you're only making 5 grand. So all right. So here's the issue. Here's how you solve it. The fighter's gonna have to take less money up front. Less guaranteed money. They're going to have to work to sell tickets, and that's just if you're a fighter just starting out, less than 5 fights, less than 10 fights, you should be doing that anyway. You should be promoting yourself anyway. So the promoter just has to school them on what the expectation is going in. The other is, you got to remember, venues are hurting too. These venues that are used to having large corporate events or live boxing or MMA or pro wrestling, etc. They're hurting. They are desperate to get butts in the seats, events happening, because you realize they don't just make their money on you paying. Let's say you pay 5-10 grand to rent out the arena for the night. That revenue is not there for them. In addition to, they also made money on concessions, so they're desperate. So what would I do? Instead of going to a 1,000 seat arena, go to a 10,000 seat arena. Just magnify, if you're only allowed 10% occupancy, for example, magnify how big of the arena you're going to go in. And then make sure you use the leverage, knowing full well that they are desperate to have an event there. Work out a deal. Maybe the first event you work out where there is no site fee, or maybe it's a very small site fee, or for instance, if they're trying to charge you 10 grand to rent the place, and very well that it's only a 10% occupancy, negotiate that down to $1,000. There's things you can do. So between saving money on the venue and the fighters, that's going to go a long way. You need to keep expenses down. So it doesn't matter if you make 50 grand It doesn't matter if you make 80 grand in a night, 50 grand in a night, 30 grand in a night. The revenue is not important. It's the profit. So we need to keep expenses down. And this is some of the ways to do that. So, in addition, you also have to make sure you have the right safety protocols in place, of course. But you also have to get creative. One of the things that is helping events launch, and I realize it's wintertime, so it's not as easy all around the country, but in a lot of parts of the country, they can still do outdoor events. It's 70 degrees in Texas and California most of the year, Florida. It's still been 70s, I've got family down there, so I was just there and it was 72. So, so anyway, you can do an outdoor event if you're in certain regions in the U.S. So, for instance, the founder of FPU, my partner, is Roy Engelbrecht. I'm sure you know him, Hall of Fame promoter. He just did a show last month, did a drive-in where people, instead of a drive-in movie theater, he did the drive-in event, a drive-in live sporting event outside. I mean, he sold more tickets than he ever does for one of his shows that he normally would do. You see this also in the comedy world. If you're a fan of like Joe Rogan and comedy, you see guys like Bert Kreischer do an outdoor drive-up stand-up comedy to get around the same issue. So I mean, there's lots of options. It's just this is the time that's going to separate the smart entrepreneur from the person who's just capitalizing on a popular sport. So you have to think like a business operator. And what are some things you can do to minimize expenses and increase revenue within the regulations? The other thing I want to touch on, and I feel like not enough small local promoters realize this, or not realize it, but don't put the effort in, is expanding your sponsorships. There's a lot of businesses out there that are trying to drum up interest, whether they are, online ads are converting at a lower rate every year. So they're always looking for different revenue streams or advertising opportunities to bring in revenue to their business. Hit up as many local businesses in your city and state, town as you possibly can. Reach out to e-commerce companies that maybe aren't, on the level of, Gilt or some of the largest brands that some of the brands starting out that wouldn't mind throwing a couple $1,000s at a local event as long as you're promoting it properly. So what is your advertising? What's your advertising strategy? Are you just relying on ticket sales? Are you running like a couple ads online? Are you buying radio spots? You need to get creative. You need to go with the cheapest assets with the largest reach that you possibly can. And I say it again and again and again, but publicity stunts. I'm not going to give an example because I've done that before, but the reach of those is huge, and you really need to be thinking about being able to do that on the local level. And if you did a publicity stunt along with some targeted ads, and then we're doing outreach to local sponsorship agencies, local sponsorship businesses, you could make a killing. So with that said, obviously there's been a tightening just, with some of the regulations and stuff like that, but we're still doing shows all the time. We're still seeing, and not just the large shows, like I said, Roy Engelbrecht just did a show last month, and many other promoters that I work with are still doing shows. They're just fewer and far between. And Dana White, like I had mentioned in the beginning of the video, he has mentioned that this is something that is concerning to him because he doesn't want to see a year of pandemic issues and worries completely cut off his pipeline of fighters. And there's no reason that it should. People vilified him for holding true to his shareholders and fighters and continue to put on events when the pandemic was at its max fear and everything. No one can tell you how to live. You work within the laws, and you put on your show, and you're doing it for not just you and your family, but you're doing it for your community. You're doing it for the fighters. Everyone else, they got to eat too. So with that said, you just need to put the proper strategies in place. So again, these are high level strategies. I'm not getting too much into the details. You'll have to go to our website and go into the program to be mentored and get through all that. But with that said, the opportunity is huge, especially when this vaccine does eventually roll out and the fears go down, and hopefully this pandemic is behind us and things open back up for good. Think about the opportunity that there's going to be with, among the 50 states around the country, the hundreds of big cities around the country that already had a need for more club shows. Think about what it's going to be when we come out of this, and all these businesses are pivoting, and this is the time where phoenixes rise out of the ashes. Not to be corny, but this is the time where smart entrepreneurs are going to really make their bread when we come out of this year. So I hope this was helpful, and I really hope that you guys take this lessons to heart. If you're already in the business, if you're trying to get into the business, I hope this inspires you to light a fire, get started, and we're here for you. So, and we'll be back again with another video. Thank you.